Nothing, she answered quietly. You are not to blame for anything. It happened because of me. Everything is on my conscience. I wish I could pretend that by this point I was done with this large part of my life and didn't need answers. Yes, I would like to pretend that I left everything behind me, but that would be far from the truth. They say the opposite of love is not hatred, but indifference. I still had not overcome my hatred, but I was already on the path to indifference. Okay, then tell me how this happened. And most importantly, tell me why it all happened. Pushing my barely sipped coffee aside and, in a fairly even voice, I continued our conversation, which was several years late. Why is simple, she began with a sigh. I had just turned 50 and I felt a little old, a little unnecessary. You know, it enters your life so elusive, it seems completely unnoticeable. In recent years, when I entered a room, the heads of men turned in my direction no longer as often as they used to. I know, she hastily added in a hurry. You always told me and showed me that I am the most beautiful for you, but it's just that sometimes we women want to be appreciated, and other people. I think Edward saw that I needed him, Tracy continued after a short pause. We were work colleagues for many years and sometimes communicated, but suddenly, somehow, he became my best friend. We started communicating almost every day, and little by little our conversations became deeper, more personal. Edward was a nice guy, and several single women from the office went on dates with him and gave him high marks. I knew he was a player, but I thought I was in control of the situation. Well, obviously I was wrong. So what, just like that you just took it and threw it away? Us? I asked, feeling my stomach begin to twist into a tight and cold knot. Well, it didn't happen so quickly, she replied. We had lunch together several times, had dinner once or twice, when I told you I was working late, and many times we just drank coffee. I knew where he was going with his game, and still, I went with him. How long did this go on, Tracy? I croaked with an unexpectedly dry throat. About a year, I guess, she replied. When he finally got me into bed, it was exciting. He was new, different from you, and it felt so wrong. This is probably why I got over my guilt pretty quickly. Besides, since you didn't suspect anything, how could it hurt you? I never gave you less, and she never did anything with him that she wouldn't do with you. Tracy sighed again, pulled the napkin out of the holder, and squeezed it in her fingers. I know it sounds corny, Ben, but it really was just sex. Yes, we had fun, but there was no talk of any love, and it never was. So you're saying that your fun in bed outweighed our marriage vows? Just perfect. I smiled wryly. Everything went pretty smoothly, and you would never have known anything if it weren't for that bore from the block, she said with undisguised annoyance. If it weren't for him, we would still be married, and we would both be much happier. Why couldn't we just go back to when things were good between us? I was only able to catch her because my retired neighbor Ralph Gordon called me one day and told me that my wife and some unknown man had entered my house in the middle of the day, and he thought it looked rather strange. Upon receiving this signal, I immediately jumped into my car and 20 minutes later found Tracy and Edward having sex in my marital bed. I interrupted the couple's enjoyment by smacking him in the back of the head with the back of my fist, causing their heads to collide like billiard balls and giving them both a concussion. I screamed, hovering over the couple, cowering in fear, for another 5 minutes before I finally kicked my lover with all my heart and slammed the door. Because everything was over between us the minute I found out about your betrayal. Just, I'm sorry, can't erase the damage done, I answered this not very smart woman. I made a mistake, a big mistake. I know you have made mistakes in your life too. Did you have to go to the nuclear level of reaction? We could overcome this together, Tracy said in a pleading voice. It's unlikely, I rasped. We were married for 27 years. Why did you suddenly think that I would give you my blessing for a year-long fling? Okay, I understand. But this happened 5 years ago. 5 years, Ben. You are alone now. I'm alone. Our kids are angry at both of us. Why can't we try again? After all, we had 27 such good years together. Tracy continued to persuade me. I wonder what she was expecting. To be precise, I corrected her, we lived together for 26 good years. I can't say about last year that it was good for me. And you know that what you did was a betrayal, whether I found out about it or not, I added. By the way, what happened to your lover after I left? Tracy raised the cup to her lips again and took a sip of more coffee. She saw that I was looking at her intently, but still couldn't help but flinch for a second. A few months later, he left for someone else, younger and more beautiful. I told you it was just sex, not love, she answered, as if reluctantly pushing the words out of herself. Yes, just recreational sex with someone else's wife, I answered laconically. And she, unable to bear it, looked away, staring at the ceiling fan. Do I deserve such disrespect from you? No, I didn't deserve it, she whispered. I stood up and brought each of us a second cup of over-roasted bitter coffee. For some reason, the disgusting taste of this drink seemed to fit perfectly with our conversation. Over the past 5 years, Tracy and I had put on a pretty good feign of mutual friendliness the few times we met at family events, but I was never alone with her or engaged in conversation. Lord knows, she tried hard to get me to talk to her, but I cleverly managed to avoid any potentially dangerous situations, both for her and for myself. I still wasn't sure if I wouldn't have snapped her neck if we were left alone, or simply broken down and drowned in a humiliating puddle of tears. Sometimes I was drawn to give vent to my emotions, in one form or another, almost every minute. Surprisingly, the only place I didn't miss Tracy was in the bedroom. Considering that in all 27 years of marriage, I had never looked at other women with lust. I had no idea about the modern night habits of the American man aged 50 plus. Soberly assessing my data, I believed that for someone like me, the likely choice in the female fish pond would be very small. What do you want from an ordinary guy of average appearance and average height, who earns fairly average money and cannot boast of that his tool is as impressively long and thick as a donkey's? Damn it, how surprised I was, and partly even dumbfounded, when next to me, from everywhere, sometimes, it seemed as if, literally out of thin air, single women began to appear, and many of them were not at all embarrassed to talk about what they wanted from me. I was completely unaware that there are significantly more single women over 50 than single men, and that many single men over 50 seem to gravitate towards younger women, leaving single women over 50 with an available choice of available partners. There are fewer men of the same age. Add here the factors of decency and communication skills, and the chances greatly increase in favor of those men over 50 who are not afraid to meet and communicate with unfamiliar women. This has never been a problem for me, so over the past 5 years I have had as much variety of female companionship as I wanted. Who would have thought? I also had a choice as to what kind of contact with the ladies I wanted, short-term or long-term. Not every woman was looking for her next husband. Some of my new female friends, as well as some men, were only interested in adding variety to their lives for a while. As for me, I, special to bestweapon.in, have dated both types. I didn't set out to necessarily find the next Mrs. Ben Arniston, but at the same time I wouldn't mind if a lady worthy of it magically appeared in front of me. The only thing that was absolutely out of the question, this is the return of Tracy Arniston to my life. What does that saying say? Been there, done that, ripped my heart out of my chest, and put a trophy on her t-shirt. So why are you alone, Tracy? I asked with some surprise. You still look great, so finding a man shouldn't be a problem for you. And you're clearly not shy about meeting men. She gasped, and for the first time I felt ashamed that I had insulted her. Actually, that's not what I meant, and you know it. I corrected myself. Tracy snorted, but then had to admit that I was right. Maybe I don't want to date another man. Maybe I've come to the conclusion that I've already met the right man, lost him, but now I want him back, she said. I know I did you wrong, terribly wrong, but I also know that you are a good person who believes in forgiveness. I know you believe it, because I know you better than anyone else. It took all my self-control not to raise my voice in the cafe. You're not a stupid woman, Tracy. Have you ever thought about what will happen if you get caught? I growled through my teeth. No, I never thought that I'll be caught, she answered. We shouldn't have brought this into our house. I admit it was a mistake. But that was the only time we did it there. Edward had been egging me on to do this in our bed for weeks. In your bed. I knew what he wanted. I just finally weakened and gave in to his persuasion. Now I think that Ralph was actually being a good friend when he told you about me. I know a lot of people just wouldn't get involved. Tracy hesitated a little, waiting for my reaction, but without waiting for an answer, she sighed again and continued her confession. In the cold light of day, the words, "I'm sorry," don't even come close to what I feel. God, I was so stupid and arrogant in so many ways. But with all this, Ben, I want you to come back. I need you. Please, Ben, I will beg for it if I have to. Her voice was close to sobs, and notes of despair appeared in it. I shook my head with only a modicum of sympathy for her obvious brokenness, as Tracy studied my face for what the answer would be. My words did not sound like triumph or satisfaction with revenge. No, I was only stating what was obvious to me. Please, Tracy, don't put us both in an awkward position. How about putting my feelings above your own for now? Exactly what you should have done 5 years ago. Actions have consequences. Alas, you forgot about it, I said. Tracy sniffled, tears threatening to fall from her eyes. You're right, again, she said, and the light of hidden hope in her eyes went out. I won't bother you anymore. There was a time when that wistful look would have prompted me to stand up and embrace her in a heartfelt embrace. I really felt a sharp pain for both of us when I watched her. Without waiting for a reaction from me, stood up and, with her head down, left the coffee shop. I watched Tracy's retreating silhouette, and then looked for a long time at the door closing behind her, until a well-dressed woman of about 50 came up to my table and placed a cup of salted caramel latte in front of me. I know. You hate our coffee, so I want you to leave on a good note. This woman said with a beaming smile on her face. You didn't tell her, did you? Just in case, she clarified. I didn't want to completely tear her soul apart. Yes, there was a time when I longed to destroy her, but someone convinced me that I was better than that. Although I still have doubts whether this is really so, I answered, involuntarily smiling. Walking around the table, the woman sat on my lap, put one arm around my neck and kissed me tenderly. I stole a glance at the engagement ring, glinting on her left hand. Sandy Caruso and I are getting married in 2 months. But I have no doubts, and unlike the previous Mrs. Ben Arniston, this good man will always come first in my life, she said with conviction. I know what it's like to lose the person closest to you. I saw one of them die in the hospital from cancer 10 years ago. That's why I will always put my man first, she cooed, giving me another endlessly loving kiss. I noticed several cafe workers scurrying around in the background smirking as they saw me kissing their boss. The staff had never met me before because, like I said, I don't drink Starbucks coffee, even though I have a crush on the franchise owner. I never thought much about karma until I met Sandy on a bike ride about 2 years ago. I haven't ridden a bike since I was a child, but after my divorce, I had a lot of free time. To stay in shape, I regularly visited the gym, but I didn't really like the cardio training there. When Tracy and I were still together, I once suggested that we buy bicycles and start riding together, but she was not at all interested. As soon as I was single, as a cleansing shake-up in post-marriage life, I decided to buy a good road bike and hit the road. I mostly rode alone, but from time to time, I joined organized group rides with other similar health enthusiasts. True, I was not very good at finding John Henry II signs, and during one of these runs, I stupidly lost my way. While I was looking around, trying to figure out which way to pedal, this woman drove up to me and, slowing down, asked if I was on the ride. When I answered yes, she chuckled melodiously. Then you need to turn your ass around and come back with me, because you missed the right turn about half a mile ago, said the fit stranger. I did as she asked, and when I turned my bike around, she was right in front of me. With inspired excitement, I watched as a more than gorgeous ass, tightly covered with elastic spandex cycling shorts, danced before my eyes while its owner, standing up from time to time in the saddle, vigorously pedaled. "Hey, genius, stop staring at my ass and catch up with me so we can talk like adults while we're driving," she turned around and said to me with a very knowing grin. For the next 36 miles, she and I rode side by side at a fairly relaxed pace, telling each other stories about our lives. I told her about my cheating wife, and she told her about her late husband, who died of cancer. We both talked about our grown children. We each had 2, and about our grandchildren. Sandy already had 3 of them, and I only had 1 so far. The total distance of our trip that day was 52 miles. The longest distance I had traveled before was 35 miles. But with a beautiful and interesting partner, all these miles flew by. The next evening, we had a date, despite the fact that the muscles in my legs were incredibly sore and I had some difficulty moving in space. After 2 weeks, our relationship became exclusive, and on the 4th date, we shared a bed. My days as an elderly, lonely playboy are over. I had a whole life ahead of me, full of new colors and impressions, and the love of a wonderful lady who made my heart beat again. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.